हरे Krishna, Pavitra Madhavi Mataji, Dandot Pranam, Shilpa Prabhupada ki Jai, Guru Maharaj ki Jai. This is Shama Guru Vidasi from Shavir.
Hare Krishna, Shama Guru Mataji, Dandot Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for joining, Mataji. So is there anyone else who wants to introduce? Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. The recording has started. Now I would like to hand over the call to Palika Mataji for the introduction of today's speaker, His Holiness Bhakti Ananda Swami Maharaj. So Mataji will introduce Maharaj.
Thank you, Pavitra Madhavi Mataji. So just a brief introduction about Maharaj. His Holiness Bhakti Ananda Tirtha Swami Maharaj, formerly known as Mahat Tattva Prabhu, is a senior disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj. His Holiness took up sannyas in 2016. A Croatian by birth, he moved into an ashram at the age of 20 and began to live a life of monk. Later, he moved to California and there has served as the temple president of ISKCON San Diego for the last 12 years. While executing his devotional service, he has evolved many innovative and successful outreach programs such as Krishna Lounge, the 16 Rounds to Samadhi magazine, the Traveling Temple Bus, the Shastra Dan program, and many more. The credit of San Diego Brahmachari Ashram also goes to him. And this ashram has over the years brought forth many exceptional devotees. He is not only a dynamic speaker, graceful kirtan leader, inspirational guide to many, but also a dedicated and sincere devotee who has been serving the instructions of his Guru Maharaj enthusiastically all over the world, especially in East European countries like Bosnia, Slovenia, and Croatia. In essence, the verse 3 of Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction comes to mind when we think of his life history. Utsahan Nishaya Dharya, Tat Tat Karma Pravartati. At this point, I would like to hand over the call. First of all, thank Maharaj for taking the time out and speaking few words in our Bhakti Sangha Japa conference. And my humble obeisances at your lotus feet, Maharaj. And at this point, I'd like you to take over the call, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. My obeisances, blessings, and prayers to all the devotees assembled this morning. If I may, I'll just jump straight into my duty this morning. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Adonai Jnanam Guna Shalaka, Chakshurumiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha, Anchakalpatarubhashta Kripa Sindhudaya Vachara, So, this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, which is entitled The Creation of the Fourth Order, and appears during the 13th chapter, the title of which is The Descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Starting with text 35, there's plenty of material for discussion in text 35, but I was told that you're trying to move through the Bhagavatam. So I will cover 5 verses as they form a unit in some ways. So from 35 through 40. Intiria vasita vitras tasya raja rajataye purudasham viravaham shipi vishtaya vishnave. The translation is, thus for the sake of a son for King Anga, they decided to offer oblations to Lord Vishnu, who is situated in the heart of all living entities. Now, purport, according to the sacrificial rituals, animals are sometimes sacrificed in the yajna arena. Such animals were sacrificed not to kill them, but to give them new life. Such action was an experiment to observe whether the Vedic mantra was being properly pronounced. Sometimes small animals were killed in a medical laboratory to investigate therapeutic effects. In a medical clinic, the animals were not revived, but in the Yajna arena, when animals were sacrificed, they were again given life by the potency of Vedic mantras. The word Shipi Vishtaya appears in this verse. Shipi means the flames of the sacrifice. In the sacrificial fire, if the oblations were offered into the flames, the Lord Vishnu is situated there in the form of the flames. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is known as Shipi Vishta. Text 36, Tasmat Purusha Saha. This to the right so you can see that. Hema Malya Malanvaraha Hiranmayana Patrena Siddham Adaya Payasam. As soon as the oblation was offered in the fire, a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and a white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice, oil, and milk. Next text. Savitra Numato Raja Krihi Vanjalina Dhanam Avagraya Mudayukta Radha Patnya Udarati. The king was very liberal, and after taking permission from the priest, he took the preparation in his joint palms, and after smelling it, he offered a portion to his wife. Wherefore, the word Udarati is significant in this connection. The wife of the king, Sunita, was not fit to accept this benediction. Yet the king was so liberal that without hesitation he offered to his wife the boiled rice and milk prasad received from the Yajna Purusha. Of course, everything is designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As will be explained in the later verses, this incident was not very favorable for the king. Since the king was very liberal, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in order to increase his detachment from this material world, willed that a cruel son be born to the queen, so that the king would have to leave the home. As stated above, Lord Vishnu fulfills the desires of the Kagnis as they desire, but the Lord fulfills the desire of the devotee in a different way, so that the devotee may gradually come to him. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Dadani Buddhi Yoganta Yenama Upayami Ite. The Lord gives the devotee the opportunity to make progress further and further so that he may come back home, back to Godhead. Text 38. Satatum Savanam Radhi Rasyavai Patir Adade Garbam Kala Utapete Kumaram Sushube Praja. Although the queen had no son, after eating that food which had the power to produce a male child, she became pregnant by her husband, and in due course of time she gave birth to a son. Therefore, among the 10 kinds of purificatory processes, one is Pum Sadanam, in which the wife is offered some prasad or remnants of foodstuffs offered to Lord Vishnu, so that after sexual intercourse with her husband she may conceive a child. That's 39. Sabala eva purusho mata maham anuvrataha adharmam sho bhavam mrityum tena bhavat adharmikaha. Translation. That boy was born partially in the dynasty of irreligion. His grandfather was thus personified, and the boy grew up as his follower. He became a greatly irreligious person. Therefore, the child's mother, Sunita, is the daughter of death personified. Generally, the daughter receives the qualifications of a father, and the son acquires those of the mother. So, according to the axiomatic truth that things equal to the same thing that are equal to one another, the child born of King Anga became the follower of his maternal grandfather. According to Smriti Shastra, a child generally follows the principles of his maternal uncle's house. Naranam Matula Karma means that a child generally follows the qualities of his maternal family. If the maternal family is very corrupt or sinful, the child, even though born of a good father, becomes a victim of the maternal family. According to Vedic civilization, therefore, before the marriage takes place, an account is taken of both the boys' and girls' families. If according to astrological calculation the combination is perfect, then marriage takes place. Sometimes, however, there is a mistake and family life becomes frustrating. It appears that King Anga did not get a very good wife in Sunita because she was the daughter of death personified. Sometimes the Lord arranges an unfortunate wife for his devotee so that gradually, due to family circumstances, the devotee becomes detached from his wife and home and makes progress in devotional life. It appears that, by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, King Anga, although pious devotee, got an unfortunate wife like Sunita and later on a bad child like Dana. But the result was that he got complete freedom from the entanglement of family life and left home to go back to Godhead. In the last verse, Sa Sharasanam Udyamya Mrigayur Vanagocharaha Antya Sadhu Mriganindina Veno Sat Ityarabjanaha. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent. Actually, I'll leave this. So only until 39, sorry, I made a mistake. So 35 to 39. And the next shloka, next time you have the call will be text 40. I have already offered pronouns to my Buddha and Srila and the Vaishnava, so I'll just begin to speak. This is a very interesting section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. One particularly interesting thing is that the king wanted to perform sacrifice, a yajna. Now, it is absolutely impossible to underestimate the importance of yajna. Historically speaking, in the times when this story is taking place. Throughout Vedic history, actually, even in recent history, which could hardly be called Vedic, but maybe Hindu history or Indian history, yajna still holds a very, very prominent position. As a matter of fact, if we look throughout the world in pre-modern times, yajna was quite important. Wherever we look, Greek, Rome, even if we look into the Arabic world, different forms, concepts of yajna are prominent. So, very specifically here, in the culture of Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that again, yajna is very, very important. It is so important that we find, for example, later on in the Bhagavatam, I think it is 9th canto, we even find human sacrifices. We find that in the 5th canto, but in the 5th canto with Jadabharat, we see that those people are literally described as super low class people who try to sacrifice Jadabharata. However, in the 9th canto, they're not so described, but of course, I'm not condoning human sacrifices. I just want to say that yajna or sacrifice permeates Vedic tradition and also Bhakti tradition as we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hardly anything can be done without sacrifice. We see when King Prithu is coronated, he is told to perform many yajnas. And not just any kind of yajna, but one of the most complicated yajnas where the horse is sacrificed. And he was told to perform 100 of them. That was the recommendation by the higher authorities. So we find this time and time again. And what's interesting, the next interesting thing is that he attempts to perform the yajna, but no devas come to take the offerings. No devas come to take the offerings, and the king is puzzled why the devas are not taking offerings. And now they find a reason, and the reason is not in the personality of the king, but the reason is with the fact that he has no son, and he has no son because of some previous sin in his life. Now we could say that this is rather a technical detail, and so this is a tension that every devotee, not every devotee only, but throughout history of all religions, we find this tension, the tension between internal and external values. For example, the mantras. So we find in the Bhagavatam that if the mantra is not pronounced properly, it will have no effect. However, in the Bhakti tradition, we emphasize not the external values as much as we emphasize internal values. So we say the form is not so important as the consciousness is important. And we find this everywhere in the Bhakti literature, right? Krishna is described as Bhava Grahi Janatana. One who does not per se accept the offering, but the attitude, the bhava, the consciousness with which the offering is offered. However, we find in the Bhagavatam, when the mantra was not pronounced properly, there was a demon was created who was destined to be killed by Indra rather than be the killer of Indra. And it was just a short, small little mistake in the pronunciation of one syllable. So some say that the power rests in the external values, and some say that the power rests in the internal values. Now it's interesting to note here that the power lies in both. Obviously, power lies in both, just like we find in the Bhagavatam. One mantra was pronounced the wrong way, and the result was opposite. And here we see that the king is having external, we could say, shortcomings. He didn't have a son, which is considered to be a result of impiety in previous times. But as the sages said in the previous verses, we find no sin in you at the moment. You're sinless, but you don't have a son. And as a son, you cannot, if you don't have a son, how can you perform these sacrifices? Devas are now accepting their offerings, etc. So this is an external shortcoming, and obviously it's having an effect. And throughout history, we find even nowadays in India, for example, especially down south when we go, there is so much emphasis on the external qualifications. Lots of emphasis on the external qualifications. And that's okay, that's actually quite beautiful. We should strive for external perfection. However, external perfection without internal perfection is utterly useless. The whole point of Krishna consciousness is not to attain external perfection. The whole point of Krishna consciousness and the life in general, because it was created by Krishna, this whole world, the point of it all is to attain internal perfection. However, we ought to also strive for external perfection for the sake of harmony and other things. And we see as we continue to read this that the king did attain perfection, internal perfection, through the media of external imperfection. And the external imperfection was the blessing upon him, was the blessing by the Lord himself. Here in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada says that the king was so blessed by the Lord that he was cursed by the Lord. So Krishna sort of cursed him. And that curse, of course, Krishna did not pronounce the curse, but he arranged so, as Srila Prabhupada said. He arranged so, first of all, he arranged that he marries a wife from a troubled background. Nowhere does it say that his wife was an evil person or morally deficient, spiritually deficient. It just says that his wife came from an unfortunate background which carries certain external imperfections. And so that was the first blessing of the Lord. And as I was reading this, of course, I immediately remember our own Srila Prabhupada, who did not like his wife. And his father told him, son, that's a blessing. Typically one should like his wife so that one can complete the emotional and other types of experiences one need to complete in order to graduate from the Grihastha and can be on the other side renounced. We find that also discussed in the Bhagavatam. But Srila Prabhupada's father thought that it's actually good if you don't like her, because then you won't be attached. Some other people, they need to go through the attachment to work it out so they can come out unattached. So that was the first blessing, that he had a wife whose family was somewhat troubled, we could say. And so when when Lord, another imperfection here, and which was also blessing by the Lord, because okay, actually before we get there, I'll return back to Yagya. So the king wanted to perform Yagya, but he was unable to perform Yagya because Devas weren't accepting the offering. So what did he have to do? He had to do another Yagya. He had to do another Yagya so that he could become qualified to do the initial Yagya. And this is the theme throughout Vedic tradition. We find it also in the tradition of Krishna consciousness. Specifically, Srila Prabhupada discusses this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the idea of purashtarya, that there are purificatory processes that ought to be done before you do the sacred act. And so yajna purifies you so that you can perform yajna. And Srila Prabhupada says we have to understand here two things. First thing is that chanting of Hare Krishna is the purificatory process for us. And it is also the preliminary purificatory process. So chanting of Hare Krishna is the primary yajna in the Hare Krishna movement. Actually, not only the Hare Krishna movement, but everywhere in this time, in these times that we live in, the purificatory process is not fire sacrifice. It is the chanting of Hare Krishna. And to become qualified to chant Hare Krishna, what do you need to do? You need to chant Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, so it's not that we don't have preliminary purashtarya, preliminary purificatory activity. We do, and it is the very same activity that we're becoming qualified to do. That's also stated elsewhere in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya, that only bhakti generates bhakti, which means that sadhana bhakti creates bhava bhakti and later on prema bhakti. So the chanting of Hare Krishna makes you qualified to properly chant Hare Krishna. I have heard so many times, and it is a supreme form of ignorance. Unfortunately, there's plenty of unfortunate souls who fall into this trap, where they say they're going to reduce their chanting so they can chant better. Or some are even worse. They say they're going to not chant because they're not chanting purely. They're going to wait to become pure to chant. These are serious misconceptions, and these souls are tremendously unfortunate souls who are falling into the clutches of illusion. One should chant and chant a lot. One should specifically chant a minimum of 16 rounds every day. And that is the preliminary purificatory activity which will make him qualified to actually properly chant. Of course, we're not only chanting in Krishna consciousness, we also serve the deity, we serve the guru, the mission, the deity, etc., etc., etc. But in terms of this topic, Purashkarya and Yagya, these are the statements. So that was one thing that the king had to perform a yagya in order to perform a yagya. So in Krishna consciousness, we also follow this because this does exist. One has to become qualified to do a thing. It's not that one just does a thing. Nowhere does that exist anywhere in the world. There's no job in this world where you just show up and do the work. No, you first become qualified to do the work, and then you do the work. So same thing holds true for yagya. You have to become qualified to do yagya. There is the process of diksha, for example, mentioned throughout Bhagavatam, for example. You cannot perform a yagya until you have become initiated. In order to become initiated, you have to perform purificatory activities. And this, they're called preliminary purificatory activities, purashkar. So, again, for us, the yagya is the chanting of Hare Krishna, and the purificatory activity is the chanting of Hare Krishna. So, the other thing in this regard is, in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, you may remember, I hope you all regularly reading Srimad Bhagavatam and are in the possession of a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is we have the description of the sages who were such magnanimous souls. They were saying that Kali Yuga was about to come, and they were very concerned, not for themselves, but for the people. This is the heart of a sage. Like Srila Prabhupada, he couldn't just not be concerned as to what's going to happen to the people of this world. He was extremely concerned, just like his guru and the guru of his guru, and all of the acharyas, all of the pure souls are concerned, full of compassion, and actually they do something about it. Not just for themselves, but for others. So the sages, being true saints, sadhus, saintly persons, they wanted to do something. And they did that which you typically do. You do yagya. You should know that they did not open any hospitals. They did not feed the poor. All of these things are good. They're pious things to do. However, these activities do not stop the influence of Kali, which is by far the worst thing ever. So primarily we as devotees, we need to concern ourselves with how to save the soul from the onslaught of the age of Kali. Save ourselves and save others. And so the sages did that which they were taught to do, which is written all over the Vedas, which is by tradition always done, namely please Lord Vishnu by yagya, and very specifically a fire sacrifice. And what was the result of it? They all got blackened by smoke. And Srila Prabhupada says, you see, this process just does not work in this time and age. And when commenting on this, Srila Prabhupada says that unscrupulous people, even nowadays, teach that one should perform fire sacrifices as the means of self-realization or as the means of expiation from sin or stoppage of age of Kali. No. Prabhupada calls them unscrupulous people. Unscrupulous, scrupuli means feeling. An unscrupulous person is one who has no feeling, no compassion. And then Srila Prabhupada says, what did the sages do afterwards? When that failed, they engaged in Krishna Katha. So Krishna Katha, chanting of the holy name, glorifying Lord Krishna, is the process for the sage. And the Sankirtana movement is specifically meant for that. We engage ourselves in chanting of Hare Krishna, glorifying the Lord, and engage others in this process. When we go out and give people books, etc., what are we doing? We're trying to convince them to join us in glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the process of Sankirtana. So, the king, to go back to the story of Prithu Maharaj, right? This is how Prithu came about. The king Anga had to perform a yajna in order to be able to perform yajna. And when he performed this preliminary yajna, he was given the personality of yajna came out of the yajna and gave him some sweet rice. Was it sweet rice? I think, right? Yajna shishta, some sweet rice was given, and he gave it to his wife, even though here it stated that he was not supposed to do that because she was not qualified. Doesn't say why, it's not explained, so I'm not going to speculate. Anyways, it's not important. But why? Because he was liberal-minded. And Srila Prabhupada, sometimes devotees discuss that everywhere, in every society, you have the liberals and you have the conservatives. And in ISKCON also, we have liberals and conservatives. And sometimes they debate whether Srila Prabhupada was conservative or liberal. But Srila Prabhupada was obviously both, depending on the situation and depending on how we interpret Srila Prabhupada's acts. And in many ways, Srila Prabhupada was extremely liberal. And in many ways, Srila Prabhupada was quite conservative. He was quite liberal to come over to America and break many rules, many customs in order to help people come to Krishna consciousness. So that was liberal Srila Prabhupada. And here it's described that King Anga was actually quite an elevated soul, quite a devotee actually, and by his nature was liberal. So he immediately gave his wife this sweet rice to take, the result of which was that they got a really, really bad son, King Vena. I assume all of you know King Vena, at least a little bit about him. A very cruel person. Later on, I think it's right here in this chapter. The story of King Vena follows in the next chapter. But I think, it's even described in this chapter. Some of the activities he would, while playing with other kids as a child, he would kill other kids, like push them over something or throw them over, and see him die and take pleasure in it. A really, really twisted, sick person, really sick. And all of this made King Anga frustrated. He was so frustrated, he just gave up on everything. Gave up on everything and abandoned it all, and engaged exclusively in Krishna consciousness. And all of this, even though in one purport Srila Prabhupada says this was not good for the king, namely that the result of the yajna, this was not good for the king, but actually it was. Not that I'm going against what Srila Prabhupada said, but I'm just saying that Srila Prabhupada himself, in other purports, said that it's actually good. So that was the blessing upon the Lord, upon the king, from the Lord. And one interesting thing Srila Prabhupada states that when a fruitive worker performs a yajna, the person offers the yajna typically to the devas, sometimes even to the demons, and sometimes even to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but with the idea of personal, selfish, and very often sensual enjoyment. And what's interesting, in the Bhagavad Gita, we also find the same statement by Krishna. I quickly give them the results. And here also, Srila Prabhupada says that they get results. Krishna gives them the results they want, the fruitive results. But Srila Prabhupada says, but to a devotee, Krishna does something else. To a devotee, Krishna gives that which devotee needs. Needs for what? To complete the mission of the human existence. Namely that the person becomes a pure devotee. Just like King Anga became so frustrated with everything, he was done with it all, and just abandoned it all to completely dedicate absolutely to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is 8 o'clock. Om Tat Sat. I shall end here, and I was told that for a few minutes we can have some Q&A discussion. Am I right about that? Question to the organizer.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. But Maharaj, you can speak a few minutes, like 10-15 minutes, and then devotees can ask.
She says you can ask if you want to speak for 15 minutes. Well, I'm also a bit on a tight schedule, so that's why I'm aiming to end by 8.
Yeah. So, do you have time for questions, Maharaj?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, then now I request all the devotees, if they have any questions, they can ask. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much, Maharaj. I especially like the point about how chanting is the purification process to do proper chanting again. I'm paraphrasing in my words. Purashcharya, some word you used.
Yes.
I liked it. That is inspiring me to chant more. I had one question, Maharaj. We do hear this often and understand it from scriptures that for this age Kali Yuga, sacrifice is not the right way, but chanting Hare Krishna is the best for this age, considering many factors like quality of the brahmanas, or chanting of the mantras in a proper way, or the ingredients for sacrifice, like that we hear many times. But we also don't abandon it completely in our movement. We still do 5 sacrifices for certain occasions, and then certain samskaras, essentially at least. Still doing it with the Hare Krishna Mahamantra chanting also. So I wanted to understand, is there a reason behind not abandoning it completely, but still continuing to do it, Maharaj?
Yes, thank you for asking the question, Prabhuji. And, yes, you have accurately noticed that we still perform yajna, specifically Agnihotra. Yes, we do that, but we understand that that's not the process of self-realization. And by performance of yajna, we do not, it's not the recommended process for neither for self-realization or for stopping of Kali Yuga. The process for purification, the process from expiation from sin, and the process for stoppage of the influence of Kali Yuga is the process of Sankirtanam. The whole book, Bhagavatam, ends the very last verses. Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Bahavo Dupashanas Tam Namami Harim Param. It glorifies the holy name as that which purifies from all sin. And the speaker is offering obeisances to the holy name and to the person who's not different from the very name. So we may perform fire sacrifice for different samskaras, etc. And these are all different cultural aspects which are quite helpful. Culture is a very important thing. Culture is comprehensive. Culture is a way of life of a group of people. That's how sometimes the term culture is defined as the way of life of a group of people. and it's the way of life which encapsulates, protects, and promotes the values that that society holds sacred. Not to go into great details, but for example, one of our metaphysical truths is that we're a servant of 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 a servant, and so on, of Krishna. So that, we consider ourselves humble. And so in our culture, we have this physical act of offering obeisances, where we actually offer obeisances to other devotees, to all living beings. Bhagavatam says we should offer obeisances even to worms and birds and bugs and lowly creatures, free from any pride. And we offer obeisances to deity, and etc., etc. We literally fall down and bow down, not just from the waist, but sometimes offer dandavats and like that. That's a physical act which is meant, which is part of the culture, which is meant to preserve our values. And specifically, one of the values that this act is attempting to preserve is the sense of humility, that we don't consider ourselves the Lord of all I survey, but actually the servant of a servant of a servant. So culture is very important, and so therefore culture has a lot of different, how should I describe them? It's composed of many different physical acts, which are meant to preserve our metaphysical values. Yajnas or yajna is one of those. And it is very important to note here that in Krishna consciousness, the yajnas we perform, and I'm not too great, my knowledge of yajnas is not too great, but as far as I understand, they're not precisely Vedic, because Veda refers to the Shruti, and we're way more focused on Smriti and Tantra, like the Bhagavatam is not Shruti. And so the yajnas that we perform are pronouncedly devotional. In other words, we perform that to please the Lord. And in that sense, anything that one does to please the Lord is a form of yajna. And it's beneficial and it ought to be done. So in that sense, in a cultural sense, we maintain these yajnas and do these things, but we could do without them. As a matter of fact, someone like a Babaji, for example, traditionally Vaishnavas, specifically Gaudiya Vaishnavas, would not take sannyas or would take Babaji. Babaji would just chant all day, night long. That was the yajna, that was everything. Chanting of Hare Krishna. So the yajnas are not necessary. And in conclusion, just at the end, yes, I guess in a way of conclusion, I guess I would like to state that it is a big mistake to promote yajna to the platform to which yajna does not belong in this time and age, namely that is the way to salvation, the way to expiation from sin, the way to stopping the influence of Kali, etc. It is not that. However, it is still very sacred and powerful. It has its effects. If none other effects, then it has the effect of the cultural effect. So I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah, yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much, Maharaj. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Any other question, perhaps?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yes, I do have a couple questions. One is
Yes.
a follow-up to your answer just now. The role of fire sacrifices, you're saying has cultural value
Yeah.
and is meant to preserve. Okay, and is meant to preserve, our primary values. You know, like for example, in ISKCON, our primary value is chanting of the mantra for the purpose of self-realization, changing our hearts toward Krishna. So I'm just wondering how this culture of fire sacrifice maintains that primary value.
Mm-hmm. Very well, thank you. Good question, I'd say. It maintains the primary value in the sense that every yagya is meant to help us understand that we are the servant and Krishna is the enjoyer. And the act of offering something in sacrifice is the first, we could say in some ways, it's a first step, first devotional step, that you take something away from what you have and you give to Krishna, you sacrifice that. And by recognizing supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're coming one, if not more than one, maybe many steps closer towards our ultimate nature, which is the servant of a servant of a servant of Krishna's servant. And so in that sense, it helps the ultimate yagya, which is the chanting of Hare Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
Mahaprabhu, for example, said that the constant chanting of Hare Krishna is possible when one is devoid of pride, when one sees oneself as the humble servant of all. Trinadapi Srinatrinad. And Srila Prabhupada specifically said that if one wants to chant constantly, that's how Prabhupada translated it. If one wants to chant constantly, then one should be devoid of pride.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful. Thank you. Just one other question was, as you were saying, the way to purify ourselves for chanting the Hare Krishna mantra is to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And so I was wondering, I think the Gayatri mantra is what we get upon second initiation.
Gayatri, yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and my understanding is that also is purificatory in the sense that it helps us to, I guess, realize the Hare Krishna mantra. So I'm wondering why the Gayatri mantra is not somehow redundant.
How the Gayatri mantra is not redundant?
And its purificatory value.
Oh, you mean needed or?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, the Hare Krishna mantra is already the purificatory process. So why the need for the Gayatri as well?
Okay, another good question. Yes, ultimately Hare Krishna Mahamantra is all we need, and when one comes to the point of that realization, one really need not do anything else. However, in our lives, we accept so many things which are favorable for speeding up the process of purification through the process of chanting of Hare Krishna. We take certain vows to do certain things, not to do other things. We rise early in the morning, ideally, etc., etc. So also Gayatri mantra, like the yagyas, they're not hurtful; they're actually quite helpful. So in that sense, we incorporate it. But someone like Babaji, for example, is a person who has come to the point where they'll just chant Hare Krishna. That's all it matters. So I guess I should state here that when we pray, and this is something which Srila Prabhupada very, very, very often states. And it's indirectly stated here too, in the life of King Anga, that King Anga did not do things independently. Rather, he consulted the Brahmanas. So Srila Prabhupada says time and time again, very often Srila Prabhupada says this, that we need to practice Krishna consciousness under the guidance of the spiritual master. So when it comes to deciding what shall we adopt or not adopt as a practice of Krishna consciousness in our life, that really needs to be done in consultation and under the guidance of the spiritual master. I just felt like I should put that up there.
Mm. Okay, so I guess the answer is that it's just another support for chanting Hare Krishna, just like
Yes.
following the four legs.
Mm-hmm. For example, forward with the principles, then you have, there are many, many things mentioned in Srila Prabhupada's books which are, some are considered more, some less important. For example, Srila Prabhupada even speaks of organization of society into varnas and ashrams. Why? So that our chanting of Hare Krishna can be supported. Because it creates a peaceful society where people can have peace of mind and stability and emotional satisfaction and emotional stability, etc., to engage in chanting of Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada also speaks of many different dharma of the wife, dharma of the husband, dharma of the tribe, etc., etc. Why? Because when everyone does their part, then that creates more or less, well, there's never ideal situation, but as ideal as it can get, situation within which one can actually chant Hare Krishna. But ultimately, we could say we don't need anything theoretically, but practically, we typically need a lot of support. But all of this support is rather secondary. The primary thing is the chanting of Hare Krishna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if this is too deep, then we don't have to discuss further, but I was just wondering, because for like things like Varnashram and the four legs and studying scripture and worshiping deity, I think it can be understood how those things support the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So I was wondering how specifically the chanting of gratitude supports the mantra.
Oh, very specifically. I personally have never, I don't recall very specifically that it was stated that in any specific ways in which it supports chanting of Hare Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
Like very, very specific. Like when you chant this, then you get this, and then you get that, and then you chant Hare Krishna back. But just
or even maybe in a more general way, how does the chanting of another mantra help us with the Hare Krishna mantra? Maybe it's too maybe it's mystical. I don't know.
I just remember the joke Srila Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said, mystical just means you don't know.
Yeah, I sure don't.
No, I wasn't saying to you. It's just reminded of Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, of course, mysticism does exist. General ways in which the Gayatri mantra is a support is found in the mantra itself. Now, in public, I ought not to discuss the Gayatri mantra, but the Gayatri mantra, for example, offers respect and meditates on the Guru, then meditates on the three deities, the deity of Krishna, the deity of Sambandha, Prayojana, and what am I missing? Abhideya. Sambandha Abhideya and Prayojana. And then when you take sannyas, then you get another additional piece of Bhakti-manta, which is quite intimate then, like that. So by offering respect and meditating on this, of course, that's obviously supports to our nature as a soul and the surrender of Krishna in very specific ways. Is that okay? I'm a little running out of time.
No, that's fine. That was very nice. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for all your answers.
Thank you to all the devotees assembled this morning and organizers for this opportunity for me to engage in Krishna Katha.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maharaj. Spare obeisances to Maharaj. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha वैष्णवेभ्यो ग्रंथराज भागवतम की जय, शील प्रभुपाद की जय, हिज आनंद तीर्थ स्वामी महाराज की जय.
Maharaj, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Maharaj. This session